gun salutes, followed by a very hectic schedule for the rest of the day. That really reflects how they both value each other as individuals, as nations, and of course how both of them are projecting that kind of bonhomie for the international community, which is definitely glued to looking at what is happening during President Putin's visit to India. You also understand that for ICC warrants, President Putin was not able to travel much around the world, but recently in September he was in China, in Tianjin, where Prime Minister Modi also met him there. And then after that, last week he was in Bishkek to address the summit meeting of Collective Security Treaty Organization, of which Russia will take over the chair from 1st June. And more important, President Putin is coming here after rejecting some of the amendments made on originally 28-point program of peace for Ukraine by President Trump, which has now shrunk to 19 and then 21. And then India's role gets also highlighted in Ukraine crisis because President Putin regularly consults, talks to Indian Prime Minister, and of course so does President Zelensky and of course EU President von der Leyen. So India's role imperceptibly, gradually, not with any grandstanding, but has become really very central to bringing peace in Ukraine. So there are reasons why international community is looking at this relationship for what it can do to the global peace and stability, but also both countries are looking at what they can do together, and that is where you mentioned increasingly effort to broad-based their relationship beyond energy and defense. And therefore, I think partly to ensure that trade becomes balanced, they are exploring new opportunities in pharmaceuticals, in engineering, in chemical products, in India's global capability centers, in about the professional Indian people who would like to go and work in Russia. So they're broad-basing and also broad-basing their nuclear cooperation. For example, not only the large-sized reactors like Kudankulam, which again they will have to decide how to take forward in finalizing Unit 4, 5, and 6, but smaller modular reactors, and of course the whole range of fuel, uranium mining to fuel fabrication to waste management, because India will need enormous amount of energy, and Russia can be a very good partner. And that is where even the defense cooperation is expanding beyond how it used to be once simply India importing weapons to then license production to about now 20-25 years of jointmanship in joint research and development, joint production, and of course enhancing India's defense exports, where BrahMos is a very important iconic weapon India is now showcasing around the world. How to take it beyond into other next generation technology sectors.
Professor. Right. In fact, let me just introduce at this point Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal as well. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Just continuing where Professor left us at. In fact, one of the big areas that India and Russia are trying to look at is mobility, labor mobility. And that's going to be quite game-changing in ways because, one, Russia is starved. Russia needs a lot more of professionals, laborers coming in, working across sectors for that matter. India would want safer spaces for Indians to explore. So both of these may really be up the alley for both Russia as well as India.
Very briefly on this issue, what I think we need to understand is that the labor mobility agreement provides a kind of a platform, or it provides a channel which will make it easier for people looking for different professions or job opportunities, employment in each other's country, and therefore it provides a kind of a channel to make sure that it is done smoothly, legally, and remittance of money, etc. There are so many things associated with it. But more important thing is that it also assumes, and that is very important, that as our cooperation proceeds along, that there will be opportunities for labor from each other's country to work in the other country. Therefore, for the Indian labor which has been traditionally going to Western countries, it may become more attractive to look for opportunities now in Russia. And similarly, it will become easier for Russian Russian people to come and work in India. As far as Russian people are concerned, there are so many projects which will be actually executing in India, and therefore, their to India will become easier with this agreement. Indian labor will need to find opportunities in Russia to work, and in that process, this agreement can become useful in providing a kind of an incentive. Yes.
Right. Professor Swaran Singh, do you want to add to this? Because, I mean, if you're looking at numbers, the people-to-people connect between India and Russia is much less compared to many other larger countries, if that's the appropriate word to really use. It's still very West-oriented. In terms of India, Russia, look at it's what, 2 lakh student population, Indian students who would be in Russia, around 2 lakh. If you're looking at targets, it's around 70,000 working professionals expected to be formally employed in Russia, say by end of this year. Those are the figures, conservative or not, that we'll have to figure out, but these are largely the figures that have been given to us. These are not very big figures, but it's very significant and symbolic of a changing trend both in Russia and India, and that's going to be reflected possibly in the mobility pact that India and Russia may go ahead with.
Absolutely. I think usually the comparisons are made between India's relations with United States and India's relations with Russia. But obviously, United States, which is about 28 trillion economy, has about 4+ million Indians in United States compared to about 300,000 in entire Russia. But there is a difference. The difference is that we are now institutionalizing the process of how to ensure opportunities for Indians in Russia. It's a formal platform being created, particularly to encourage high-skilled workforce from India to Russia. Second, and I think much more important difference here is that very few countries, wherever you travel across Russia, whether in bigger cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, or in smaller towns, even Far East areas, there is a general sense of friendliness for India. India is seen as a friendly country. Indians are seen as friendly people. They are welcome in Russia. So in that sense, when it comes to safety, security, and opportunity for Indians to be actually materializing on the ground, operationalizing such mechanisms that we are trying to build, I think it will become an attractive destination for Indians to explore opportunities for employment, research, education in Russia. And likewise, I think it's also important, as Russia will have to now focus increasingly on expanding investments in India, particularly maybe in oil refining sector. There would be also the same platform giving opportunities for Russian people also to come and work in India. I think the institutionalization at the interstate level is an interesting format which is being created here, rather than simply people individually exploring opportunities and the states only worrying about visa process. It's a platform being created by two states as to how to ensure right people go to right places, get right opportunities, and feel secure in pursuing those opportunities. And in that sense, India, which is a young population country, which is now becoming world famous for having about 1.8 million people employed in India's global capability centers, is becoming a kind of a name for high-skilled workforce, which is becoming attractive to other countries. And if Russia has to constantly ensure sustainability and competitiveness in international exports for Russia, in Indian high-skilled workforce, I think, will become very attractive for Russia in that sense. And that is where the reciprocity can also expand in ensuring that the relationship becomes mutually attractive to both sides. And India's youth would perhaps be a very, very attractive workforce for Russia to create such a mobility platform, which is where I think the two countries are almost ready to announce something as to how that will be institutionalized in allowing Indian young population to explore opportunities, particularly when we are hearing, visa regimes tightening in United States particularly. And we often hear of, the Indians finding some challenges in Australia or in some other Western countries. This could become an alternative platform, just like for education. When education visas became difficult in United States, Canada, Australia, Britain, and so on, you saw so many Indian students going to other countries, including Georgia, Ukraine, Russia, and many other countries which also welcome Indian students. Likewise, for employment as well, I think this is going to set an example. And Russian example then could be expanding to entire Eurasia, because India is also trying to expand in terms of Eurasian Economic Community, FTA, that India is also negotiating, could again replicate a similar process and create similar platforms where Indian youth can go and contribute to development of many of these countries. Because when we talk of lowering the tariffs, lowering the barriers, we often only talk of commodities and services. We don't talk of workforce. India has enormous skilled workforce, and it can export that workforce, which not only brings remittances, but brings goodwill and so on.
Right. All right. I'm also being joined by Lieutenant General Arun Sani. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Good morning. Time for a very short break because President Putin is expected any time at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. But interesting point here about how institutionalization of people-to-people exchange is going to be important, and that's been the very foundation of how India and Russia really have taken their relationship forward, institutionalization of their relationship.
A very, very, important guard of honor is being organized in Rashtrapati Bhavan with 11 gun salutes, followed by a very hectic schedule for rest of the day. That really reflects, how they both value each other as individuals, as nations, and of course, how both of them are projecting that kind of bonhomie for the international community, which is definitely glued to looking at what is happening during President Putin's visit to India. You also understand that for ICC warrants, President Putin was not able to travel much around the world, but recently in September he was in China, in Tianjin, where Prime Minister Modi also met him there. And then after that, last week he was in Bishkek to address the summit meeting of Collective Security Treaty Organization, of which Russia will take over the chair from 1st June. And more important, President Putin is coming here after rejecting some of the amendments made on originally 28-point program of peace for Ukraine by President Trump, which has now shrunk to 19 and then 21. And then India's role gets also highlighted in Ukraine crisis because President Putin regularly consults, talks to Indian Prime Minister, and of course so does President Zelensky, and of course
you have Prime Minister Modi as well as President Draupadi, who are sitting there waiting to welcome President Putin for the ceremonial welcome. A very, very important meeting, a meeting that has been very closely watched by the world leaders, and it's been the headlines literally across newspapers, across televisions globally. Very significant in a changing world order, in a new world order. It's not just about how Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, they share a very, very close relationship, very close tie. It's also about how two nations have grown in their relationship. And let me just introduce my guests again at this point. We have Lieutenant General Arun Sani with us. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Swaran Singh is with us. And I'm also being joined by Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal. Well, Lieutenant General Arun Sani, do you want to just talk about what we are witnessing right now, even as President Putin is going to make his way to Rashtrapati Bhavan, and we can see visuals of our leaders waiting to welcome them. This is very much reflective of what Professor Swaran Singh was speaking, and that is the institutionalization, the bedrock of India-Russia ties, from what it was in 2000, a treaty of friendship. And those are the visuals, the live visuals on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, live visuals of President Putin arriving at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, the ceremonial reception being accorded to President Putin. Lieutenant General Arun Saini, how do you make out of what's playing out right now? Two leaders, two nations, very close to each other, but largely very representative of how the two nations have moved very symbolically, strategically with each other.
Yeah, good morning to you, and thank you very much for getting me on your channel. Firstly, let me just say that I think the personal chemistry of Modi and Mr. Putin requires no elaboration. I think it has been obvious in the meetings that have happened before this, and was again obvious in the manner that he was received yesterday and the manner the events have unfolded for the day today. But more importantly, I think what really has changed, I think I'll digress a bit from where the professor left off. I mean, he talked brilliantly about the fact that institutionalizing migration. I think there are security interests as far as Russia is concerned, where it would like to see a diaspora which is more, I would say, passive to the current kind of machinations in the terrorist and in the fundamentalist world that is happening. A large workforce of his still comes from Central Asian republics, but they are again susceptible to certain pressures. And I think maybe that's the reason why they are very keen also now to take this and formalize it as an institutional program. More importantly, let me just put it that President Putin's visit at this particular time, if I take...
श्रीमान अंतर सेना सम्मान गार्ड निरीक्षण के लिए हाजिर।
I have never seen Dhoni this angry.
ये तो पक्का फेक।
Ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan. I'm being joined by my guest right now, Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal. Let's just talk about what we witnessed right now. This is nothing but a ceremonial welcome, but is it just that? Can we really restrict it to just that? Because the world is looking at what's unfolding. Look at the way President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, they spoke to each other while they were welcoming, along with President Draupadi, they were welcoming President Putin. The body language, very, very clear of a very comfortable relationship between the two of them. A lot has happened over the last few hours. Can this, even though this is a ceremonial welcome, can this be seen just like that? Ambassador Suresh.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I have seen so many ceremonial welcomes, and this is always something which raises your hair, really, because it's a very impressive ceremony. 21 gun salute, the guard of honor, the rituals of the ceremonial part is practically same for all the arriving presidents, the heads of state, and as this one. But there is a the warmth which gets reflected sometimes in the body language, in the way you treat each other's guests. That is exceptional that I can see here. The president and the chemistry between President and Prime Minister Modi is really, really great. So in that sense, what we see today here is not just ceremonial, but it is actually reflective of the deep relationship between not only India and Russia, but also between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. President Murmu, of course, is performing a great role here as the president, dignified as the head of state should be. But in functional relationship, what we see between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin is exceptional.
And what is going to be the focus for the next few hours, Ambassador, is also going to be very prominent in the sense that the discussion, the discourse for the bilateral is also going to set the tone. A lot going to move beyond defense, as it were, and that's what we were discussing with each of our guests. What are you picking up? What do you see would be the big takeaways from this meeting?
I will not go at the moment into the granular picture. It has been talked about a lot in terms of the S-400, S-500, cooperation on the BrahMos, etc. The trade, energy, all that is going to be there, and the logistics, which has taken place a couple of months ago, but is now moving ahead in terms of the labor mobility agreement.
Absolutely.
But beyond all this, frankly, what actually it is showing is that, and that is one big takeaway to my mind, that Russia-India relationship is an important factor in the global power matrix, in the changing alliances, and what we see in terms of the evolving situation globally. You name Ukraine, you name USA, China. China is a huge factor. You name Russia, China. In all this scheme of things, in this entire matrix, India remains an important factor. And that President Putin came, he makes very few visits. He didn't even go for G20, as we all know. He went only for the SCO. But he has chosen to come to India to indicate the strength of relationship.
Right.
And to get the importance of the relationship and the importance he attaches to India. And India attaches to Russian relationship. I think that is one big takeaway from here, which should be important for USA, China.
Right, I think we lost Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal's audio. Lieutenant General Arun Sahni, you were making a point about how it's imperative for Russia and India to move in a very, very different dimension when it comes to even the defense deals, despite a very strong background to that.
Thank you very much. I think, good morning once again. I think we got interrupted because there was that fantastic ceremonial reception for him, which was being aired, and I think with both the national anthems playing, I think we correctly did that, giving due respect to the anthems that were being played. But as usual, as a soldier, it's always a pleasure to see a fine parade, and I think what was there in the ceremonial ceremony that was just conducted, it was extremely well done. But coming back to the issue, I would say there are 2-3 things that we have to be very clear of. I think in the longer run, the relationship with the West and with the US will need to be nurtured and maintained, and that is what is happening with the methodology of patience that is being exercised in trying to work out a trade deal with USA and not actually thwarting the whole system on the head. The second issue is that within the Eurasian landmass, the 2 great players today, really big players, are China and Russia. Russia had started the Eurasian landmass, various associations, which as a matter of its reducing power matrix has sort of dawned on the Chinese side, which to an extent is not the best thing that's happened as far as we are concerned. But then I think our relationship with Russia will ensure that there is a certain amount of balance, and whatever happens in the Eurasian subcontinent, which is with which we are very firmly linked, there is a place and space for us at the high table, and we are part of the decision-making matrix. In the overall matrix of the overall global situation changing, I think it has, again, it's a reassertion of the fact that India is going to follow a path of strategic autonomy. I think we'll need to balance our relationship, and I've always been a very strong proponent of having maintained this balance, and it's good to see that India-Russia relationship is back in center stage. We do have a large diplomatic and a large diaspora which sort of insists that it was all the way whole hog to the Americans, which I think as of now has proved that yes, we need to develop long-term relationships, but we also need to have our options open. And I think that is where, in that context, the 3 or 4 issues that you have talked about, institutionalization of the people movement, migrations, utilization of workforce, and I think the labor intensive kind of institutional framework in our 2 relationships will actually go a long way in meeting the challenges of livelihoods as far as India is concerned. Coming on to the energy sector, I think undoubtedly when we look at the nuclear thing, the Kudankulam is the place where we have got 2 of our reactors ready. There are still 4 more which have to be activated. Well, that's an area which needs to be put up in a faster time frame with India's benchmarks of how it wants nuclear power to be part of our energy security in the next 4 to 5 years. We are looking also at the nuclear fission small reactors that we are talking about, the SMRs that are talked about. Russia is quite an expert in that, and maybe that's the area where we would look at as far as energy is concerned. I think when I come on to defense, which is my core competency, if I would like to share out here, other than what is on the geopolitics and the geostrategic, I would say I think India's Make in India efforts are on the right stream. But for us to be able to get maximum dividends would only start seeing or being fructified maybe another 4 to 5 years from now, when we'll start seeing that. There are still gaps in high technology areas, linkages in our ISR domain, between the space, the AI, the logarithmic capabilities, linking it to the weapon systems and profiles, and getting into the battlefield. I think to cover this gap, as we see, we live in a very, very dangerous environment as of now. And in this dangerous environment, I think we need to be self-sufficient as far as our military hardware is concerned. So I think the relationship, which was of a buyer-seller, has now moved into the realm of being that of co-developers. If you look at it, we have also HAL has signed a deal for the civilian aircrafts to be manufactured in India. So we're going into a different realm away from defense, but related to certain activities and competencies and trust that we had developed, or ecosystem that we had carved out. So that is happening on the defense side. Today, when you're looking at the hypersonics, you're looking at this new age weapons which can be connected and be part of the logarithmic warfare that is now has already dawned on us, all of us, and we are in that particular era. Maybe this is the gaps that can be filled up with the co-produced sharing of technologies, and Russia has always been forthcoming. And if we go by the fact that they are willing to offer us the complete TOT as far as the Sukhoi 57 is concerned, the 5th generation stealth aircraft, which the West calls 4.5, but the fact that they're willing to offer you cutting edge technology indicates that the gaps that exist for us need to be filled up. And to tell you that, and coming on to the other aspect, yes, there is a challenge as far as Russia is concerned on the timelines with its ongoing.
Lieutenant General Arun Sani, I just get back to you. Let me just introduce my guest, Major General Sudhakar Ji, as well at this point. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. In fact, let's just take it from where Lieutenant General Arun Sani himself has left it. He's spoken about a very important point, and that is the need for India to balance its ties. And what's playing out right now vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis President Putin, is exactly possibly a testimony of just that, because we must remember India has maintained its position, whether it be on Ukraine, whether it be on tariffs, whether it be on trade. India has maintained its position very clearly and has ensured that it has not lost out on its allies. How do you look at what's playing out, particularly the very important telling visuals on the screen?
Yeah, good morning, Sneha. Thank you for getting me for your show. If you allow me, I would like to go beyond the boundaries defined by you. There are bigger things happening in geopolitics one should be mindful of. There is a rebalancing of power taking place in the world order. And when I talk about the rebalancing of power in geopolitics, I am not actually referring to the G2 or the bipolar world, which USA and China willy-nilly, very tacitly, they have been coming to a platform of convergence. And if that happens, that leaves India in a lurch, because China is our arch rival and has got geographical contiguity. We have already fought one conflict, one war. There have been skirmishes. There are serious points of disputes. So that is one aspect has to be kept in mind. And also the dominance or the sphere of influence of China is expanding far and wide, and particularly in the South Asian subcontinent. We should be mindful that the security paradigm will be very, very central, particularly in this meeting. Yes, you have indicated about trade, energy and security, so as the Lieutenant General. There is nothing more to add, but I wish to add one point, that Russia is the only country in the world which is offering the state-of-the-art equipment with technology transfer without any strings attached. Let's not ignore this important aspect. They have done it in the past, they are doing it now, they will do it in future. It is not only an evergreen and higher than Everest and deeper than ocean relationship, it is something exclusive and extraordinary between India and Russia. That has to be taken note of. We should be cognizant. The second point that I wish to highlight is that India, directly or indirectly, we have conveyed to the world order, particularly USA, that in 21st century, it is a new India, it is a resurgent India. Please don't ever expect India to buckle under pressure and compromise our strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy of India has come here to stay eternally, and it will grow by the day, and it will grow stronger and stronger. So therefore, when you put pressure on India not to buy oil, the hidden agenda is, transactions are being done in a non-dollar currency. That is the real fear of slow de-dollarization, which is irking and actually creating jitters in the minds of the people and the policymaker in USA as a superpower. So be that as it may, India is not going to buckle under pressure. Although I feel a pragmatic approach to the whole issue would be to diversify. We started from 1.6% in 2020-21 of our kitty of import of oil from Russia, and it went up to 41% in September 2024. However, in September 2025, it has dropped to 31%. I believe and presume that India is diversifying and looking for other markets to procure or buy its fossil fuel. So that's a good thing to do, but to buckle under pressure, under the threat and intimidation of USA is not acceptable to a country of the size of India. Third and most important point, I also wish to convey that what is happening in Pakistan or Nepal or Bangladesh and Indian Ocean region should be a point of concern. The threats are actually started manifesting in different paradigms, in different nature, contour and color, post-Operation Sindoor. Therefore, there is a requirement to bring in the third vector or the third sphere or the fourth sphere. When I say fourth sphere, we need to understand what are the three spheres which are already prevalent or existing in the subcontinent. The first sphere of influence is actually the authoritarianism, that is, China has penetrated into its...
Major General Sudhakarji, just interrupting you at this point, we have the visuals of President Putin arriving at Rajghat. These are the visuals on our screen. This is right after he was accorded the fantastic ceremonial welcome at Rashtrapati Bhavan. We have President Putin now visiting the Rajghat.
सबको सन्मति दे भगवान ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम 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 भज प्यारे तू सीताराम ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम 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 भज प्यारे तू सीताराम 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 भज प्यारे तू सीताराम ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सन्मति दे भगवान रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम रघुपति राघव राजा राम पतित पावन सीताराम
Putin laying the wreath at Rajghat, a very, very important moment. Professor Swaran Singh, even as President Putin lays that wreath, this is also a very important moment between India and Russia as the two countries look at new avenues for people-to-people connect.
There is no doubt that the relationship between Soviet Union and now Russia and India has seeped into intersocietal relationship as well over a centuries period now. So common people do have a positive feeling towards each other, whether it is about Indians or about Russians. But let me take a minute to explain to your viewers the significance of this ritual of ceremonial welcome with guard of honor. That is how President of India welcomes foreign leaders, because President of India is also Commander-in-Chief of Indian Armed Forces. And in this case, both President Putin and President Murmu are both Commanders-in-Chief of their respective armed forces, and the welcome showcases how armed forces, the tri-services, also present themselves in that welcome ceremony. Likewise, the visit to Rajghat is also very significant because India is showcasing that India stands for peace, and that symbolism is very critical. When you talk about a dozen or more agreements that are going to be signed, today that process has already happened in various interministerial meetings, interdepartmental meetings. We had NSA traveling to Moscow, we had Foreign Minister traveling to Moscow twice. Leaders, they use their time in showcasing what is the future direction they want to give to the bilateral relationship, what are the important issues they want to underline and showcase. And that is where you see here, India is ensuring that President Putin will pay a visit to Rajghat, showcasing that India stands for peace. And when it happens immediately in the backdrop of President Putin having come to Delhi after kind of rejecting the amendments made by European leaders on President Trump's peace plan, and role of India over several months has become very significant in how to ensure end of Ukraine war. This is very significant symbolism in both the ceremonial guard of honor in Rashtrapati Bhavan and then the visit to Rajghat. The brass tacks will now take over when they meet in Hyderabad House and talk about what are specifics they have to clinch in this meeting, what are the things they want to achieve in coming months and years. And then, of course, we'll see the press conference where they will be formally addressing the media to show what have they agreed and what they are going to do in coming months and years. And again, underlining the uniqueness of bilateral relationship of India and Russia, which stands out in many ways very, very significant for optics for both sides. India, which has had a difficult relationship with President Trump for several months, almost 8 months now, and a similarly, a difficult relationship with China, which is thawing, of course, now for a year. This showcasing of India being a country which can have a very positive relationship with another major power is good for India to showcase India's strategic autonomy. Similarly, it's very significant for President Putin to visit India because, he's not had too many visits in last 4 years, given the fact that ICC, International Criminal Court, had issued a warrant against him. That made him to travel very few countries. He was in China, in Tianjin, for example, in September, which again made the pictures of President Putin, President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Modi, that body language was kind of a very great talking point of media around the world. Now again, after his visit to Bishkek, where he went to address the summit of Collective Security Treaty Organization of 10 nations, which Russia is now taking over as chair from 1st January next year, and then to visit to New Delhi. I think it's also an opportunity for President Putin to showcase his welcome around the world. And then, of course, specifically, India wants to make sure the partnerships with Russia can help India grow into a developed country by 2047. Similarly, Russia, which has suffered a great deal in terms of its defense exports going down, wants to make its defense research and development and production much more competent and potent and competitive at a global level. And India is a great partner. And as General also mentioned earlier, India-Russia relationship in defense cooperation is very widespread now. It's about joint designing, joint research, joint development, joint production, joint exports, and so on. And that suits both sides if they want to work together and explore complementarities. Defense remains an important complementarity. Similarly, in energy, great complementarity of Russia being a great supplier, India in great need of enormous amounts of energy as it grows into a great power in the coming decades, a fast-growing economy, and so on. But even there, I think more than crude oil, the nuclear power generation is going to be much more complementary in how they can build a bilateral relationship. And that is also expanding not just in terms of huge mega-sized power
Right.
reactors in Kudankulam, but also small modular reactors and so on.
Right. Ambassador Suresh Goyal, very important symbolism here, a very important welcome here. And in fact, as President Putin has laid the wreath, there's also a note which just came up on our screens. I couldn't read what really was mentioned in that. It's going to be important to see what President Putin chose to write in that note as well at the Rajghat. We'll have to see what emerges out of that. But Ambassador Suresh Goyal, do you want to build on what Professor was speaking? And that is the importance of how India is giving the message of peace. And it has, from the beginning, at every global forum, stood firm on the fact that there cannot be any development, there cannot be any movement, there cannot be any trade, there cannot be any bilaterals in a situation and in a geopolitical situation where there isn't any peace, even at the UN.
It's a difficult scenario that you're putting in front of me. Last time you told me that my audio was not good. I hope that my audio is now reaching you. We have to look at it this way. Peace is very, very important. Clearly, unless there is stability globally and across the borders, particularly with the countries that we are conducting trade, cooperation in different fora, unless there is stability, obviously the development cannot be effective. It cannot take place. But to have that stability and to have that peace, it is important to be ready to face any kind of security situation. I'm saying that simply because if you look at today's globe, and you mentioned about the United Nations, I think the United Nations stopped being the instrument of peace long time ago, even at the end of the Cold War. If we want to have the peace and therefore to maintain the security in the world, we need to make sure that there is a kind of a balance of power. Unfortunately, we find that that balance of power has become very, very fluid. And it is not just one country or the other. Things have changed rapidly. Now, 1991, when India launched its economic reforms, and there was the end of Cold War, Soviet Union dissolved, huge uncertainty, and we began to open up to the West and to ASEAN to develop our economic strengths. Today, USA is our major partner, not only just economic and trade, but also defense, and also, please do remember Indo-Pacific concept, Quad.
Right. Ambassador Suresh, you're totally out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all our guests for joining us. It's time for a very short break. On the other side, our rolling coverage of what's unfolding in India as the world looks on, as President Putin as well as Prime Minister Modi are going to meet shortly. Taking over from me, my colleague Kartikeya Sharma.